I never imagined something like this would happen when I found out Otis was going to stay with us for a few weeks. The only thing on my mind was doing Emma a favor. The house is empty anyway, so why not? I thought, between Andrew's long trips and quiet nights, I figured having a bit of youthful energy around would be nice. But now, watching Otis step through the door, I couldn't help but take a deep breath. He wasn't that little boy anymore. The shy, awkward kid I knew as Emma's son had turned into a tall, broad-shouldered, and confident young man. The simple t-shirt he was wearing showed off his toned muscles, and his slightly bashful yet charming smile made me look away. I couldn't stop questioning myself. He's grown so much, but is it even right to see him this way? I knew Andrew would be away for weeks again, so a part of me was glad Otis was staying. I hated being alone in the house, but at the same time, I felt this unexplainable unease. His presence stirred both excitement and a strange sense of danger within me. When I bent down to help him carry his suitcase, our arms brushed for just a second. His skin was so warm it startled me. Otis didn't seem to notice, or if he did, he didn't show it. But for me, in that moment, everything shifted. That night, as I tossed and turned in bed, I kept asking myself the same question. Is Otis staying here just going to be a regular visit, or is this going to spiral out of control? If you want to be the first to hear stories like this, make sure to follow our channel and turn on notifications. This story is about to take some really wild turns. I've always been a woman who draws attention with her looks. My curvy figure, full hips, and smooth skin have always made people say I don't look my age. Knowing this, I've never shied away from wearing low-cut tops or outfits that highlight my shape. But when I learned Otis would be staying, I started looking at my wardrobe a little differently. Being around someone as young, handsome, and striking as him made me feel like I needed to tone it down a bit. Otis didn't get into college, which is why Emma asked me for a favor. Let him stay with you for a while just to get his spirits up, she said. He has dreams, but he's been feeling down lately. Honestly, I couldn't say no to Emma. Besides, with Andrew away on his long hauls, I didn't want to be home alone. But the moment Otis walked through that door, I realized I was bouncing between a kind of excitement and an unnameable tension I hadn't felt before. His tall frame, broad shoulders, and athletic build were full of youthful energy and charisma. Even in a plain t-shirt and sweatpants, he looked like some kind of movie star. I told myself, you're going to treat him like an aunt would, but deep down, I knew it wasn't going to be that simple. The next morning, we were supposed to have breakfast together. Normally, I'd wear a mini nightgown in the mornings, but having Otis in the house made me more cautious. I picked the plainest robe from my closet, wrapped it around me, and went to the kitchen. He showed up in a gray tank top and shorts. When he rested his muscular arms on the table, my eyes couldn't help but linger. With his usual shy yet sweet smile, he said, "Thanks for making breakfast, Olivia." "It's no trouble at all, Otis," I replied. "You know you're welcome here for as long as you need. Whatever's best for you, we'll figure it out together." Otis hesitated for a moment, like he wanted to say something but wasn't sure if he should. I waited for him to speak, but when he didn't, I couldn't hold back. "So tell me, why didn't you get into college? A kid like you must have been pretty popular at school, right?" With a shy little smile, he shrugged. "Honestly, I couldn't focus on anything other than sports. My dream was always to become a fitness trainer, but I didn't do so well with exams. And socially, well, I guess you could say I stood out a bit too much." I raised an eyebrow at him. "So what you're saying is girls couldn't leave you alone, huh?" He averted his eyes, but the small grin on his face said it all. "Something like that," he admitted. "But I really want to get my life on track now." Otis's honest confession both impressed me and sparked my curiosity. As we sat at the table talking, I could feel the atmosphere between us growing heavier with every passing moment. Having someone so young and determined, yet so vulnerable sitting across from me was exciting in a way I couldn't quite put into words. That breakfast seemed like any other ordinary morning, but deep down I knew this visit wasn't going to leave anything in my life ordinary anymore. Maybe it was the age difference that got to me. I was 39 now, and Otis was only 20. How long had it been since I was around someone so young, full of energy, with dreams still shining in their eyes? His vibrant presence made me nostalgic, taking me back to a time when I still chased my own dreams, a time when I felt alive in ways I hadn't in years. Or maybe it wasn't just him, maybe the fault was Andrew's. My marriage had long since lost its spark. Being a truck driver, Andrew was gone most of the time, and when he did come home, we barely had anything to talk about anymore. The sparks we used to share had dimmed over the years, fading little by little. I still loved Andrew, of that I was sure. But lately, I'd started realizing that love sometimes just wasn't enough. That morning, Otis grabbed his gym bag and headed for the door. As he walked out with his muscular back and confident stride, he called out, "See you later tonight." I smiled and waved. "Take care," I replied, but the words running through my mind were something else entirely. The silence in the house started to feel suffocating. I grabbed my coffee, sank into the couch in the living room, and reached for my phone. I called Andrew. The phone rang for a while before he finally picked up. "Hey Olivia," he said in his usual tired tone. "Everything okay?" "Yeah, thing's fine," I said, but the emptiness in my voice was so obvious even I couldn't ignore it. There was a pause. "This week's going to be busy too. I got a new job, so I'll be home a few days later than planned," he said. By now, I wasn't even surprised. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. "Got it, Andrew, just be safe, okay?" I replied, keeping it short before ending the call. A strange sadness lingered in me after hanging up. Not long after, Emma called. "Olivia, thanks again for helping with Otis. I'm so grateful you're keeping an eye on him," she said. "It's no trouble at all, Emma. He's doing great here. He's been hitting the gym and seems to be in good spirits," I said. "I know you're trying to help him, and it means so much, but he needs a bit more direction. Even if he doesn't go to college, he can still achieve his dreams, right?" "Of course," I replied. I truly believed Otis could make those dreams come true, but Emma's words left me feeling a strange pressure, like she was counting on me to be the one to guide him. By the time evening rolled around, Otis came back from the gym. While he was out, I had gone out myself to grab coffee with an old friend. When I got home, the house lights were already on. As I opened the door and stepped inside, I noticed the faint glow and murmur of the TV coming from the corner of the living room. Taking a few steps in, I saw Otis sprawled out on the couch. He must have just gotten out of the shower. All he had on was a towel wrapped around his waist, but it had slipped down enough to reveal part of his thighs. He had the remote in his hand, but his eyes were closed. He must have dozed off, exhausted from whatever intense workout he'd put himself through at the gym. My eyes, almost without permission, wandered over his body, the definition in his back muscles, his long, strong legs, that perfectly sculpted look only hours of dedication to fitness could achieve. I tried to look away, I really did, but my gaze kept pulling back to him. I took a deep breath, but what I saw had gotten to me in ways I didn't want to admit. Something stirred deep inside me, and I fought to push those feelings down. I silently scolded myself. "What the hell are you doing, Olivia? This is so wrong." I moved closer, thinking I'd adjust the towel over him, but the moment I reached out, I pulled my hand back. I didn't want to wake him, and I definitely didn't want to risk being caught in such an awkward situation. Instead, I gently slipped the remote from his hand and placed it on the table. Then I went to the other room to grab something to cover him with, but as I walked away from the living room, my heart was still racing. The sight of him lingered in my mind, playing over and over again. Was I drawing some kind of connection between his youth and my own, or was Otis's presence awakening something in me, something I hadn't felt in years? Later that night, lying in bed, I closed my eyes but couldn't sleep. That scene was burned into my mind. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake it. It scared me, and yet it filled me with a strange sense of curiosity. The next evening, we sat across from each other at the dining table. We'd spent most of the day at home and hadn't really talked much, but somehow our conversation at dinner started flowing. We each had a glass of wine, and as the meal ended and we poured a second round, our chat grew more intimate. As always, Otis was polite, but then out of nowhere he said, "Olivia, you're honestly such a strong woman," looking straight into my eyes. The unexpected compliment both surprised and deeply moved me. "What makes you say that?" I asked with a smile, but I could feel warmth blooming inside me. "You can just tell," Otis said. "Even talking to you, it's obvious you've been through a lot in life, but you've stayed so beautiful and positive. That's not an easy thing to do." I picked up my wine glass, taking a small sip. "It's not as easy as it looks," I said. "Sometimes you just act like you're strong, even when you're not." Otis's face grew serious. "I know," he said quietly, his voice softer now, "but that doesn't change how special you are." His words hit me right in the heart. No one had made me feel this way in such a long time. My relationship with Andrew had always been distant, and his lack of attention left me feeling lonely most of the time. But here was Otis, sitting across from me, someone who not only understood me, but made me feel like I truly mattered. I raised my glass with a smile. "What about you?" I asked Otis. "Why is someone like you not doing everything you want in life? You're as charismatic, handsome, and capable as they come. I can see people going out of their way for you." Otis chuckled softly. "I don't know. Maybe it's because no one ever really asks me what I want." Those words hit me deep. "You know, I get that," I said. "Sometimes, no matter how much we try to be seen for who we are, we end up feeling invisible." Otis nodded, his eyes locking with mine. "Exactly. But you're different, Olivia. The more I get to know you, the more I want to learn about you." My heart was racing now, his words stirred something inside me. "You're different too," I said, my voice softer than before. "You understand me in a way no one has in a long time." There was a moment of silence, we were just staring at each other. I can't fully explain what was happening, but there was this pull between us, a connection both emotional and physical. Otis leaned in slowly, and without even thinking, I found myself leaning toward him too. Every fear, doubt, and hesitation I had disappeared in that moment. When our lips met, a rush of excitement surged through me, something I hadn't felt in years. I didn't think about whether it was right or wrong, all I could focus on was the intense closeness, the overwhelming feeling of belonging. That kiss with Otis wasn't just physical attraction, it was like rediscovering a missing piece of myself that I didn't even realize I'd lost. Later, my head was pounding. The dim light in the room revealed the first thing I noticed, the body lying next to me. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself as I sat up. Otis was there, sleeping beside me in nothing but his underwear. My heart started to race. What had happened? I closed my eyes tightly, trying to piece together the night, the wine, the laughter, the way he looked at me so intensely, lips touching. But then everything blurred, it was like the night had disappeared into a fog. Trying to quiet the buzzing in my head, I got out of bed, rubbing my temples. I looked down at myself, I was still in just my lingerie. The sight of it made everything feel that much more real. Otis's soft snores filled the otherwise silent room. "What did you do, Olivia?" I whispered to myself. I hurried to the bathroom, closing the door behind me and turning on the shower. Standing under the stream of water, I felt a mix of shock and something else, something that almost resembled peace. I hadn't felt this alive in so long, but at the same time, a wave of guilt was creeping in, gnawing at me. The combination of emotions left me completely off balance. How did I let myself get this close to him? And more importantly, what was Otis feeling? What was I going to do about Andrew? I stayed under the hot water for what felt like forever, trying to pull my thoughts together. I couldn't remember the entire night, but the parts one could remember were enough. The connection between Otis and me was so real, so intense. A part of me knew how utterly wrong this was. Otis was just a guest in my house, Emma's son, a young man. But another part of me couldn't ignore what he'd made me feel that night: seen, wanted, alive. When I stepped out of the shower, wrapping the towel around me, my mind was racing with what to do next. Andrew was coming back in a few days. Things weren't exactly perfect between us, but this was a whole different level. Could I ignore Otis? Could I just forget what happened that night? The things I kept telling myself felt like lies. Was what happened with Otis just a mistake, or was it the answer to something I'd been searching for all along? When I walked back into the living room, Otis was awake. His face showed a mix of emotions, guilt and maybe even a little relief. "You're awfully quiet for this time of the morning," he said with a faint smile. I didn't know what to say as I looked at him. A voice in my head whispered that things were only going to get messy, but Otis's expression wasn't guilty at all. If anything, it was calm and steady, almost reassuring. "Otis." I started, but the words wouldn't come out. "It's okay, Olivia," he said gently. His voice was calm, kind. "You don't have to explain anything to me. But just so you know, for me, nothing about it felt wrong." His words only made the whirlwind inside me worse. In that moment, I realized there was no going back. Everything had already changed, and I might not be able to control it. What came next? What was going to happen when Andrew got back? What would Emma say if she ever found out? But the biggest question was, what were Otis and I supposed to do now? It was the last night before Andrew's return. Otis was in the kitchen quietly eating something, while I stood by the living room window, staring out. The evening chill crept in, adding an even heavier silence to the air. "I never thought I'd turn into someone who'd think like this," I said, not sure if I was talking to myself or to Otis. He stepped out of the kitchen holding a glass of water. When his eyes met mine, I felt that same deep questioning gaze again. "I know what you're thinking," he said in that steady voice of his, "but Olivia, sometimes life takes us to places we don't understand, and what we find there, sometimes it's the most real thing we've ever known." I tried to respond, but the words got stuck in my throat. That's when I realized how heavy the air between us was. Otis took a few steps and sat down beside me. "I don't know what happens next," I finally said. My voice was barely above a whisper. "None of us do," he replied, "but what matters is knowing what you want." For a moment, I was struck by how someone so young could feel so wise. When I noticed the tears welling up in my eyes, Otis gently placed a hand on my shoulder. "Andrew's coming back tomorrow," I said, "and everything will go back to normal." Otis took a deep breath. Going back to normal, or going back just like that night? Those words etched themselves into my mind. When morning came, the house was eerily quiet. Otis was gone. The emptiness he left behind felt bigger than ever. On the dining table, I found a note: "Olivia, never question where life takes you, because sometimes the path leads you exactly where you're meant to be, even if it's the place you tried hardest to avoid. And that path, it's always beautiful." Holding the note in my hand, I looked out the window again. I knew I'd never forget the emptiness and intensity of what I was feeling in that moment. Otis had come into my life like a storm and left just as quickly, but the marks he left behind, they were here to stay. And now, with Andrew on his way home, only one question remained: what life was I going to choose? If you made it this far, I know this story has left a mark on you. There's so much more to share, and you don't want to miss a thing. Hit that follow button, turn on notifications, and don't forget to leave a comment about this story. I can't wait to hear your thoughts, so let's chat in the comments. Your support means the world to me.